So you want to buy the scope. One rifle scope that is the be-all, end-all of your dreams. The scope that'll do everything that you could possibly think of. So, of course, you would need a very wide magnification range. Something like a 1.5 to 15. Yeah, that sounds really capable, like disgustingly capable. 1.5x, really close, perfect. 15x, pretty damn far for practical style shooting. And what happens if you have really deep pockets, like $3,000 deep? Well then, ladies and gentlemen, this will probably be one of the first scopes on your list, the March FX. Now, before I go any further, while this scope is $3,000, it is nice to know that you can get it in a couple of different options that would greatly reduce the price in the mid 2000s. Somewhere around 25 to 2600, you could buy one of these with slightly different turrets, slightly different reticles, slightly different illumination, and even second focal plane as opposed to this dual focal plane optic. What does that mean? That means that the reticle that is milled for scaling is in the first focal plane, so it's constantly the correct scale it needs to be accurate at any magnification, and the really bright dot illumination is on the second focal plane, so it never changes size. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. As far as the overall physicalities, March scopes feel like a high-end Swiss watch. I've used that analogy before in the past, and I will continue to do so, because that's exactly how they feel. In hand, all the touch points, all the materials, all the finishes, all the controls feel so precisely made, it's not even funny. Marches are made by the Denon Corp in Japan, and they're basically made a la carte. Every time you see a website that has a March in stock, odds are they ordered it like that so they can have it in stock, because March will not just mass produce scopes and have them sit on shelves. So everything that you buy from March is made to order. Oh, it's wonderful. Locking eyepieces should be standard on every optic regardless of price, but, people like fast focus eyepieces for some reason. But this thing, the eyepiece is excellent. Everything is so tight. Magnification ring, just shy of 180 degrees from minimum to maximum. There is a little bit of a thumb ramp there, but as you could see, you definitely need an MK machining or something similar to that as a throw lever to really use the magnification ring properly. As far as the illumination control, this has two different modes, or two different ways that it operates. The button is to turn it on and off, and the rheostat on the outside turns it from its minimum to 1, from 1 to its maximum of 6. But as you can see, as I adjust the brightness, the parallax knob moves as well. It was the same thing with the Shorty 1 to 10. They both did the exact same thing. And that's one thing where it's like, this is a how many $1,000 scope? And yeah, it's going to turn unless you're really, really, really careful or use two hands. To me, it's a complete miss of the target, completely. I really do understand what they're trying to do is give you the best of both worlds, but I feel like it was just a little bit half-baked. As far as the turrets, though, the locking mechanism on this particular model are the shurikens, I want to say. Don't quote me, I'm really bad at English, or any language for that matter. But English is my first language, so that's my excuse for just being bad at things. The lock on this is super simple and easy to use. When it's white, it's on safe. When it's red, it's locked. I would actually prefer that to be a little bit backwards. But I guess March thought that if it was red, you'd see it easier. Meanwhile, red is usually, danger. So red unlocked makes more sense to me. However, once they're locked, these things aren't going anywhere. And when they are unlocked, they sound and feel absolutely perfect. As far as weight-wise goes, this optic is claimed to come in at 24.6 ounces, 37 ounces, including a mount and an offset red dot on top, is pretty dang impressive for this package. This is literally one scope that could do 98% of most people's shootings. Just for a comparison, we have the Warhawk, War Chicken, Cow, Hawk, whatever, 2 to 10, which comes in 7 ounces heavier on paper. Before we go any further, can we just pause a moment to appreciate that the individual who sent this scope into me painted it like this just because they didn't care and they just wanted it to be their own. Oh, you gotta love it. This reticle in particular is the DRTR2B. March does offer this with several different types of reticles, but not all of them are dual focal plane like this. Again, what I mean by dual focal plane, the Christmas tree style reticle is on the first focal plane, so that will change size to keep the scaling the same regardless of magnification, and the center dot illumination is going to be on the second focal plane, which is why it's still the same size. There's a lot of moving parts for this, and as a result, it has some quirks, if I may be so bold. Trying to get the focus on this reticle to be as sharp as possible is no easy feat. In fact, it was damn near impossible. I got it as good as I could get it, but it still wasn't anywhere near as good as I really felt it should have been capable of getting to. I noticed the same thing with the March 1 to 10, and I think it's just mostly down to the fact that these scopes are really small, but have a 10x multiplier. And I think, regardless of how good the glass is, March does say it's ED glass, I think it's just stressed well beyond its limits. The sound and feel on these turrets is absolutely wonderful. There's zero play. I would prefer, again, the coloration on the lock being swapped, but it is what it is. As far as the hash marks not lining up 100% perfect, that's how it came to me, and I did not want to mess with it because the guy had it zeroed where he needed it. For $3,000, this thing better perform down here flawlessly. Illumination is more than bright enough. I'd say if you're looking for a red dot bright illuminated scope like this, you're going to have to look elsewhere, but it's still more than bright enough, I feel, for like 95% of the people out there. As far as how the reticle lines up, it's very close to my target, but slightly canted. When we adjust the side parallax, you will note that the center part of the image will change the size before the bottom part. It gets a fisheye lens and then an inverted fisheye, which I guess we can call that, not pincushion, barrel distortion. It goes from fisheye to barrel distortion. And that, I think, is part of the reason why the reticle isn't as sharp as it could be, especially when you get the center just right. A lot of the outside of the reticle softens up a lot. Adjusting our magnification, we do not have a shift from the first focal plane reticle onto the target. However, if you look very, very carefully at the 6 o'clock position, we have the large post in the second focal plane and the fine drops on the first focal plane. And you can note that they're not perfectly centered. The larger, thicker stadia line on the second focal plane is favoring the left edge by a little bit. Gentleman on a rock slide who does a lot of very long-term reviews and durability tests had that actually cause a problem to the point where he sent it back into March. And March said that they fixed it and sent it back, and it was still slightly canted. And the reason for that is you have two things that have to be absolutely perfect to one another inside of a scope with a lot of different moving parts. You're asking for a lot. And unfortunately, again, I feel the scope might be a little overworked. 4 mils over, 4 mils up, it lines up flawlessly. Resetting our windage back to 0, again, it is perfect. Let's see how well this thing will continue when we climb up the ladder to 9 full mils. As we increase our elevation, everything still looks really solid. Now it is going to favor the right-hand side of that target because, like I showcased earlier, it was slightly canted in the mount, and I didn't want to tweak this too much because this is where the guy had it and where he wanted to keep it. At 10 full mils, you could see we have to go 1 mil up from center. Everything lines up really, really, really well. Basically to the point where I would not be concerned with this at all. This is as good of a performance as I was expecting for the price point. Considering that I've seen scopes in the $300 to $400 range absolutely knock out a tracking test like this out of the park, and scopes in the $200 to $2,500 price range be 2 to 3% off or worse, I'm very happy to see that at least this thing tracks quite well. As far as slop to the erectors on the windage and elevation, there's none to speak of. Just like with how good these turrets sound and feel, it tracks just as good as that. So, wonderful, wonderful performance March. I really love this reticle as far as a dual purpose reticle goes. At the lower magnification, you have a very simple, easy to use duplex with a very bright center dot illumination. It is frankly wonderful and something that I would love to see on other scopes, but at a more obtainable price point. Again, though, this is very advanced technology and you're only going to find it on very expensive optics. This is, however, not the first or even the second scope I've ever reviewed with a dual focal plane reticle. The first was actually a USO that I believe I bought that, or was it lent to me? I can't remember. It was a while ago, actually. But it was a 1:4 in dual focal plane, and it just made 0 sense, because why even bother having a first focal plane 1:4 at all? I mean, there's no point to it. But maybe in the very near future, we'll be looking at another first focal plane 1:4 and pulling it absolutely apart, because it's frankly horrible, to the point where I think something's really wrong with it. Focusing on my 81-yard tracking target here, it's the same one that's inside my garage that I do for precision tracking. I just mounted it up to my tree, so this way I had something to focus on in my backyard and test things like resolution, image stability, and overall brightness and sharpness. At 15x, you can see that the shadows creep up extremely fast. But worse than that, it's that the image just becomes really sloppy. The reticle itself is not super razor sharp even on the best of conditions, but in slightly lower light conditions like this, where it's a little hazy, a little rainy, it's even worse. And even worse than it being bad at 15x, it's actually worse in the middle of the magnification range. And this is something I've experienced with a lot of other first focal plane LPVOs in the 1:8 to 1:10 category. Again, I think they're just being pushed way too hard, trying to do way too many things at once. Kind of like a 3,000-pound Honda Civic with 1,000 horsepower, trying to put all that power down to the front wheels while still turning and braking and, all of that stuff. Eventually, something somewhere is going to fall apart. And for this scope, it's with the Eyebox, exit pupil, and image stability. It is poor, very poor. Look at this image. You go slightly off center, and it looks like you smeared Crisco grease on the front lens. It's horrible. Fortunately, the second focal plane illumination is visible all the way into the shadows, and that's probably the best thing about it. I mean, the reticle as a whole, I think, is absolutely perfect, but I don't think it's used as effectively as it could in even like a 2 to 12. This reticle in a 2 to 12, I think, would work really well, especially one that's much more stable than this. Maybe we'll be taking a look at some of those options very soon. But for right now, even at 1.5x, it still doesn't have a very impressive performance. March claims that the exit pupil on this thing at the minimum magnification of 1.5x is 8.7 millimeters, and at the maximum magnification, it's 2.8 millimeters. To put that in retrospect, let me just pull up, I have a huge list in front of me, so bear with me. Here we go. Another very expensive optic, the Mark V HD 2 to 10, 15 millimeters at the bottom end, but 3 millimeters at the top end. That's pretty significant down low, but even this number means that technically the exit pupil on the March is a little bit larger than what it is in the Leupold. But gosh, it doesn't act like that. Despite the fact that the exit pupil is quite small, the Eyebox itself is very generous at 1.5x. That's because those two are not mutually exclusive. Eyebox just means that you can get behind it in a weird and awkward position, especially pretty far back. But the exit pupil is when you have the perfect view looking through it, and everything else just sort of falls apart. 1.5 is not bad. Unfortunately, everything else just starts to degrade rather quickly. Again, because the image stability on this thing is as poor as it is. I never enjoyed using this, regardless to whether or not I was in a stable position or not. I threw this on a couple of different rifles, everything from an airsoft gun to a precision rifle, and I never once got the impression that it was worth its price point for how it performed optically, which is really, really upsetting. I mean, just look at how rough this image looks at the higher magnification. Not only that, look at how tight everything seems. The second you start going off center, everything starts to just fall apart. And at 15x, it's almost not even usable. And it really makes me beg the question, why would they even bother with a 1.5 to 15 when they could have just done like a 1.5 to 10 and probably made a vastly superior product? Things are further kicked in the groin when we start losing a little bit of light. I mean, when I filmed my Eyebox test, it was as bright as it could possibly be. Same day, sun's gone down over the horizon. You can see the shadows starting to creep in. Illumination on this thing, again, is wonderful, and being dual focal plane is absolutely the bee's knees. But I'd still rather a scope that looked better to get behind. As far as overall brightness at 1.5x, looking beyond the scope and then through the scope, everything looks pretty consistent as far as brightness goes. However, just like we saw earlier with the exit pupil being small, as we increase the magnification, you could see just how much darker the outside edge is looking through this thing. I shift the camera side to side so I could showcase just how quickly that shadow comes in. It creeps up immediately. It's not even a creep up, it's more like a jump scare. it just takes you by surprise. And just keep in mind, the darker it gets, the worse this optic is going to perform, because as light goes down, your iris in your eye is going to dilate, and it will get larger than what the exit pupil is capable of producing in this optic, and it's just going to have this weird dark shadow like that, and there's nothing you could really do about it. Maybe this thing will perform better in farther distances, in brighter environments. Let's find out. The reticle, again, perfect. Because at the lower magnification, you want something that's easy to pick up, easy to read, and easy to use. A duplex like this with a bright center dot is all I could ever ask for from any sort of optic. And this thing performs absolutely wonderfully. Focusing in on our first solar panel at around 360-ish yards, I have the side parallax set roughly to where I think it's going to be. However, there are no numbers on the side of this. It's just a ramp, so you gotta zoom in and figure out where you're going to be. Not like on some scopes where you can ballpark it and get it pretty close. For this, it's a much harder ordeal. This solar panel actually looks really quite good. Pretty sharp, pretty clear, zero chromatic aberration to speak of, but the reticle still doesn't look that sharp. I'm talking about U numbers on the windage to the right-hand side. It just doesn't seem great. Focusing our attention on the 1,000-yard solar panel, I'm not going to touch the side parallax. I want to see exactly where it's going to lay when we push the distance back almost 3 times further. And at maximum magnification, I have to say it's pretty damn perfect. I wouldn't touch the side parallax, even though I do, to see if I could always squeak out a little bit more performance. But this image here actually looks quite good. There's a lot of boiling mirage. It was cool air, hot sun, and unfortunately, that's where you see all that air turbulence from. I shut off the illumination because there's no point in having it on, killing the battery, because we already know how well it performs. But I really can't complain about this image at all. It's mostly due to the fact that the camera is perfectly set up behind it, and we have beautiful, bright, sunny, clear weather, and everything is just driving as well as it possibly can. But it has to hit every mark in order for it to perform like that. Adding 10 mils of added elevation, the image definitely looks a little bit on the softer side, but still more than usable. If you don't want to run this optic with these style turrets and you want to use the reticle for drops, they do offer a capped windage and a capped elevation version for less money. But why would you do that when you can buy these turrets? They also offer different style locking elevation and windage turrets, which is something that you might want to look into if you don't want to spend the coin for this particular setup. However, I really think that out here, this thing's performing way better than it had been. Mostly probably due to the fact, again, that everything was perfectly set up, but also just how bright it is. It makes me happy to see this thing perform well, but it also makes me upset to know that if not everything is perfect, then it's not going to perform as strong as it possibly could. There are plenty of other optics that I've reviewed that perform really well in varying different types of environments, whether it be low light, high wind turbulence, air turbulence, just you name it. Not perfect position of the camera behind the scope, and it just works perfectly fine. Showcasing just how tight 15x is one more time and how those kidney shadows from asymmetrical lenses creep up on the opposite side of where we're going. It's really tight. I mean, there's nothing else I can really say, folks. I'm beating this to within an inch of its life. It's dead. Let's just enjoy it one last time before we get into our side-by-side comparisons. But damn, as we get towards the middle of the magnification range, it just, the shadows actually appear to get worse. But nothing is worse than the image instability at the mid-range magnification like that. It basically half the magnification range looks like this. And I can't accept it. I'm sorry. And that's going to bring us nice and neatly into my first comparison with the Leupold Mark V HD 2:10 by 30. This optic, depending on illumination setting and reticle now, can be found anywhere from the $2,000-ish price point upwards to almost $3,000 with their new CMR reticle. But I'm gonna say this right now: the Mark V is a much better purchase. Let me just run over some stats. So the March is only a half-inch shorter than the Mark V. The Mark V is actually a half-ounce lighter. Field of view, not even close. All things considered, the FX having a half X advantage on the bottom end, 70 feet to 53 feet roughly. But on the top end, again, there's a 5X difference up here. The Mark V HD is only 10.5 feet at 100 yards, whereas the March is 6.6. But looking at these two images side by side, which one would you prefer? Now, granted, yes, we could pull back the magnification on the FX to meet the 10X on the Mark V HD, and maybe it'll have a slightly wider field of view. But as far as sharpness, clarities, colors, depth of field goes, you can't touch the Mark V. It is supremely nice and capable. You might not like the TMR reticle, and I hear you, folks. I really do. But it's a very practical and simple reticle to operate. It's nowhere near as nice as the reticle found in the FX, but this scope is a little bit less expensive than the FX. Unless you want illumination on the Mark V and you don't want the special turrets on the FX, then, they're within spitting distance of one another price-wise. But performance-wise, image stability-wise, enjoyment-wise, the Mark V is far and away a much better option. The only reason why you might not want the Mark V over the FX is because you think 5x more is really going to make that much of a difference at farther distances. Well, these are the same size backers, the white backers. The shoot and see targets are slightly different, which is why they're different sizes. And yes, there is a significant size difference. But as far as being able to pick up details on the shoot and see targets, I mean, 5x really doesn't make that much of a difference, especially when you can basically dance around the Mark V HD and still have a perfect image looking through it. Oh man, it's like these two scopes are kind of sort of similar, but really not. The Mark V is designed to be just a simple workhorse, whereas the FX is this Swiss style, elegant, over the top, extravagant show of force when it comes to engineering, design, and manufacturing. And as much as I can appreciate what March was doing with the FX and even the Shorty, I can't swallow it. I'm a meat and potatoes kind of guy. I want to have a big fat ribeye and a sweet potato. I'm a Mark V kind of guy. And that's just the way it is. Take the analogy for how you like it. Between these two, there's no comparison, folks. The Mark V HD is the superior optic. And now that Leupold actually put in a reticle that it should have come in, it's an even easier win. For an as configured difference, the Nightforce NX8 2.5 to 20 by 50 is $1,000 less expensive than the March. $1,000. It might be 1.4 inches longer and weigh about 4 ounces heavier. But again, you want an optic that's just a much better experience? The NX8's really hard to beat. Yes, the reticle setups are nowhere near as versatile as what the FX has. I mean, the Mil XT on the NX8 is amazing above 10x. Below that, it's really hard to use. Optically, though, the NX8 is vastly superior, again, because of its ability to stay sharp at the extremes. 20x here at 100 yards. Now you can see the 5x going in the opposite direction from the Mark V HD. And there's a clear difference between these two. Not just in the size, because we have an extra 5x on hand with the NX8, but the sharpness, the clarity, and the colors are a little better on the NX8. Yeah, there might be a little bit more chromatic aberration popping up with the Nightforce as opposed to the March. The March, that's one thing I have to say, there's very little aberration going on with the March lenses, but that's not the be-all end-all of how a scope's going to perform. The NX8 is another great option. The only real complaint I would have is the lackluster option of reticles in the lower magnification range that will work for the full sweep of the magnification range, and maybe a non-locking elevation turret. But they're definitely not deal breakers by any means or stretch of the imagination. Who would I recommend what for? Well, the NX8 is definitely geared slightly more towards the precision crew, and understandably so. But if you're wanting to build a firearm that's going to be your do-it-all, your one and done, you don't care about budget, the FX will fill that role a little bit better, but I'd still take a Mark V HD, especially with the new reticle, folks. But if you want to go a little bit more towards the precision side of things, you have to go with the NX8. Everything about it is better when it comes to a precision standpoint, and it's just an absolute joy and wonderment to use. Now, with all that being said, I haven't got my hands on it, but some people that I really do trust their judgment and their opinions on have gotten their hands on the new PLXC 2.5 to 20 by 50, and they say it is better than the NX8 in a couple of different ways, reticle scaling being one of them. So, if you really like what the NX8 has to offer, but you want a little bit more of the features like the FX, maybe just wait a little bit longer until the PLXCs come out. As of right now, Primary Arms told me Q3 of 2025 they'll start releasing. I told them I really need to get my hands on one of those to review, because if it is true that it is better than the NX8, holy cow, that thing could really upset the market in a very good way for all of us. And the last comparison on the docket, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the one that stings the most. Because the Continental from Vector, this 2 to 12 by 44 first focal plane cheap budget optic outperforms the March FX in almost every conceivable way. You're talking about a scope that's 1/5 the price. Yes, it's made in China as opposed to the creme de la creme Japanese company that is Dion. But just look at these two side by side and tell me honestly which one you would prefer. These were filmed on the exact same day. Now, yes, the March does have a slightly better color tone to the colors downrange in the image, but everything else goes to the Conti, except for the illumination. But the new 6.9 reticle and the new illumination knob from Vector definitely increases the brightness levels a good bit, but they're still nowhere near what the March is capable of producing with the dual focal plane reticle. But the view through the Continental is so much larger than what it is on the FX. And the reticles at max magnification here 15x and 12x, they're basically the same style, almost the same exact look. And even the targets don't look that dissimilar size-wise, despite the fact there's a 3x delta between these two scopes. And that's because the view through the Continental is that much larger. Not only is it that much larger of a view, it is 1.8 inches longer than the FX if you're really wanting a very short optic, but it's only 2.5 ounces heavier, which is really not a lot. Field of view, it's going to be swayed, again, because the delta on the magnifications between these, but we have 54 to 10.8 with the Continental and 70 to 6.6 with the FX. Eye reliefs are about the same at 3.8 to 3.9 inches. I do not have a spec for the exit pupil on the Continental, but I would say that it is better than the FX. The Continental is why I really don't like the FX. Because if Vector can produce a scope of this quality, of this magnitude, of this capacity for this price, then March has no excuse. Now, sure, Marches might be made to a much higher standard, and maybe they're a little bit more durable. Some people have reported that Vectors can break under less than strenuous activities, and I can completely understand that. But everything is going to break. Everything can and will break eventually if put under enough stress. But would I trust the Continental enough to use it in a serious role? Well, I just put it on a new rifle of mine, and I plan on beating the ever-loving crap out of it, because I do feel that it is one of the best optics, if not the best optic right now on the market, especially for the price. Between these two, I think there's absolutely no comparison. None whatsoever. None to speak of, ladies and gentlemen. The Vector Continental is a better overall scope than the March FX. You can go and say whatever you want in the comment section below, but from a user standpoint, from a enjoyment standpoint, the Continental will make you all warm and fuzzy inside, whereas the FX will leave a bad taste in your mouth. I understand why many of you might be taken back by this review. But the truth is, if you're spending, and let's be honest, an exorbitant amount of money on something, it should be perfect. This scope is not, by any means or stretch of the imagination. If you want to spend $3,000 on a bulletproof optic, that'll do a lot. The Mark V HD is definitely an option. Hell, Nightforce Attacker 40-16x42 is an option and less expensive. Sure, it's not going to have the same magnification range, but as far as a scope that will do almost everything and laugh every time you drop it, those are two much better, less expensive options than this. I'm much more concerned about how a scope performs optically and how it's going to be able to be interpreted by the end user. The problem that this scope faces, being as small as it is, I mean, it's only 10.6 inches long, I think really lends to its overall inability to perform as good as it really has to keep up with the competition. The same thing for the March Shorty 1-10. That thing's like 7.5, 8 inches long, but it's a 1-10. What do you expect from that? It was $3,000 of disappointment, and unfortunately, that's what this scope is, especially when you feel it in hand and you touch all the touch points and you feel just how solid it is. It's just, it goes from, wow, this is unbelievably nice, to, this is kind of disappointing to use. And that's the reason why I really don't like this optic. If you have a March FX or a March Shorty with a 10x erector and you love it, please let me know in the comment section below. If you've experienced similar experiences to what I've experienced, that makes sense, with all of the Marches, all three of them, the 3-24, the 1-10, and now this 1.5-15, please let me know in the comment section below as well, because I want to know if maybe it's just me, maybe my eyes are broken, maybe my cameras are all broken, But I have enough scopes under my belt right now to know what works and what doesn't work. And this thing, despite how massively capable it can be and should be, it's just a swing and a miss for me, folks. That's sad. With all that being said, though, a huge thank you to the individual that sent this in for review. He let me have this for way longer than he should have, and for that I am insanely appreciative. I loved running it, but I hated running it at the same time. It's one of those love-hate sort of relationships. But just like any good abusive relationship, sometimes you're better off just being rid of it. Thank you all very much for watching. As always, I'll see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you could still help by using my affiliate links in the description below, and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.